STLC, Software Testing Lifecycle. While we were discussing about software development lifecycle, we saw a phase called testing in SDLC. In testing phase, we will do lot of activities. How to do these activities is all about software testing lifecycle. In STLC, we talk about what all the activities we will do in testing phase and how to do these activities, in which order we should do the activities. What should be done first, what should be done next. All these orders and systematic way of performing these tasks in testing is called as STLC. Before talking about the phases in STLC, I would like to introduce two important terminologies: entry and exit criteria. These are the important terminologies when you are preparing for your ISTQB certification examination. Entry criteria is nothing but a minimum set of conditions that should be met before starting the testing process. For example, I need to draw a painting. What is the minimum condition for me to start that? I should have a pen, I should have a pencil, I should have a paper, I should have an eraser. So these are the minimum conditions that has to be met before I start drawing. So similarly, when you want to start testing, there should be minimum conditions that has to be met. That is called as entry criteria. Exit criteria, similarly, there should be a minimum conditions that has to be met before you should announce that the testing is completed. If you say the testing is completed, there should be no defects. There should be no outstanding defects with high or severe priority and criticality. There should be no gaps. These are the minimum conditions before announcing that the product is completely tested. Based on the exit criteria, the team will decide whether this can be moved to the production phase or not. If the exit criteria is not met properly, the product is not termed as a quality product. These are called as entry and exit criteria. These are the 6 phases in software testing life cycle. Requirement analysis. As I told you earlier, when there is a requirement analysis in testing phase, the testing team will talk whether these requirements can be testable or not. They will discuss whether all the requirements are practically possible. Everything will be discussed in this requirement analysis stage. Next one is test planning. During test planning, they will plan how to test, how to start the testing process, how much resource we need, how much days we need. Those plan will be prepared on test planning stage. Test design stage, they will design the documents. Environmental setup. Environmental setup, they will set up the environment, they will set up the automation frameworks. They will do smoke or sanity testing to check whether the product is compatible on the environment. And test execution, they will do the actual execution of the product. And then test closure. During test closure, they will prepare the closure documents. They will say these are the understanding from this project and these are the bugs which were outstanding. These are the metrics. Everything will be given in the test closure report. Test closure report will say whether this is a quality product or not. Based on the outstanding defects or based on defects raised in this phase of execution, how much critical defects are raised, how much stable the product is, everything will be described in the test closure phase. Let's see one by one. Requirement, which we discussed already. During requirement analysis, they will all sit together and discuss whether the requirements are testable or not, and if they are testable, if they are practically possible or not. And during this phase, the testing team will identify the scope of testing and they will prepare the scope document. Scope is nothing but, for example, if there is a login module which has to be tested, what is your scope? Your scope has to be testing that particular login functionality from PC, from mobile, from different aspects from where you can log in with different valid and invalid criteria. So what is the scope of testing will be identified during this phase. And they will prepare the scope document, and also they will analyze whether this particular product is feasible for automation testing or not. They will pull in lot of automation framework and check whether the automation possibility is there or not for testing this product. If, for example, while discussing, if they found that any of the requirements are not testable or any of the requirements are not practically possible, they will arrive with the mitigation plan, backup plan. So test planning, the next phase of SDLC. In this phase, the manager or the lead or higher official will prepare the test plan document. The test plan document contains how we are doing this testing, which test methodology we are using, from what is the date, from and to date for testing required, how much days the testing phase requires, and the strategy documents. Strategy documents deals with what is the strategy or what is the approach they are using for testing this product. Next is effort estimation, how much effort is needed, that how much time is needed and how much resources are needed, and each has to do how much execution per day, or these plan will be figured out. Because if a particular resource has to do 15 test cases per day and there are 200 test cases totally, how much days it will take for them to achieve? And if there is a contingency, if there is a resource is not available, what is the backup? All these will be available on this test strategy document. And run plan, if it is a batch dependent project. For example, if this is a financial project or financial product, there will be a batch run happening in the backend. So you have to put a proper run plan. If you need an end of day or end of month, so you have to prepare a run plan document. For example, if there is any credit voucher projects or something, your credit points will get accumulated and posted to your account only at the end of the month. You will swipe your credit cards and you earn lot of points. You will book flight tickets. You will earn lot of points. That points will be given to you as a cashback at the end of every month. So that you should have an end of month batch running in testing to check whether these points are posted or not. For these kind of testing, you need to plan out the run plan. I need this day, I need to have an end of day batch. I need to have an end of month batch. You need to plan these activities. That is called as run plan document. And then in this test plan document or strategy document, you will arrive on what automation tool you are using and what approach, as I told you earlier, or what techniques you are going to use, and resource planning as well. What are the resources, which position they hold, what is the roles and responsibilities for them, how many leads required, how many engineers required, that will be identified during this phase. Test design. During test design phase, the team will be figured out actually. These are the team, these are the engineers, these are the leads. So those team will sit together and they will start preparing the actual test cases and they will start writing actual test scripts for automation. They will start preparing what is the test data required. Everything will be prepared in this phase. The leads or the managers will review these documents and the review will also happen in the design phase. And there is this document which is so important. This is called as RTM, Requirement Traceability Matrix. Once you are done with the test cases, your test case documents and your scope document will be compared. If there is a scope, whether there is a particular test case for that scope, whether that scope is covered. The next scope, if this is a scope, whether there is a particular test case or test cases for that particular scope. So to check whether all the scope is covered, that is called as requirement traceability matrix. And then test data. You will create the test data for the environment and you will also create the test scripts for the automation testing in this phase. Environment setup. Once the environment is given to the testing team should set up the system date, the country code or the currency code, whichever they require. What is the hardware readiness and software readiness? If there is a printer required, if the printer is connected to the system and it is working. All the initial hiccups will be checked in this environmental setup phase. Here the automation framework is ready or not. They will download the build and install that into their environment and check whether the build is actually running. To check, the initial small test cases will be checked, which is called as smoke or sanity testing, sanity test cases. Test execution. This is the major part of testing and this is the time taking part of testing phase actually. You will need lot of days for this execution phase. Here the execution phase, there is an entry and exit criteria for this execution phase. The entry criteria is the environment should be ready, the product should be available, the product should be compatible. The test cases and test data should be ready in hand to execute. And in this phase, the team will actually execute the test cases and actually run the automation test scripts and check whether the test cases are passed or test cases are failed, and if they fail they have to log in the defect, and if the defect is fixed they have to retest the defect and confirm if it is okay or not. They will closely follow the defects, and they will close the defects, and then they will prepare the execution report. They will prepare the daily status report. They will participate in daily defect calls. They will prepare the defect reports. Everything will be done in this execution phase. Next is closure. The execution is completely done, and this is the final stage of testing. Here the testers will check whether all the test cases are executed, whether all the defects are fixed and closed. If there is any open defects or outstanding defect, to check the priority and minimum severity. If they are with minimum priority and severity, they should update that in the report and send it to the next stage that this can be deployed. I will give you a sign off. This is okay to deploy because this is a low priority defect. Everything you will define in the test closure document. If that is a high priority defect, you can give a no-go saying that this cannot be deployed in production because this is a high priority and a very severe defect. And also you will say that this product is qualified to production movement or not in this phase. Also in this phase you will prepare an important document called as test artifacts. Test artifacts is nothing but the learning from this project, what you learned from this project. Those will be prepared as a documentation so that the next execution will not lead to these areas. See, this test artifacts will contain both the learnings as well as the do and don't do things. Whatever we did, whatever we should not do, whatever the mistakes we did in this execution, everything will be there in the test artifacts document, which will be referred in the next phase of execution or next cycle of execution, and the team will not repeat the mistakes. These are the test closure activities basically, and one important activity is if there is any outstanding defect, as I told you earlier. If you say this is an outstanding defect available and we can go to the production still, in that case what to do with the outstanding defect, that will be decided in this phase. Whether to defer that defect or whether to descope that defect. Descope is something that this kind of scenario will not happen in production, so that we can descope it and move to production. So these kind of decisions will be taken in this test closure phase. Thank you so much and stay tuned.